How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Guys, great dialogue coming our way. We are going to be discussing three sacrifices all leaders must make. I don't think people may realize that leaders do have to make sacrifices in order to move up. And we're going to be discussing three sacrifices in specific, and trust and believe there's more. But I felt that these were the three that most people could relate to, especially when it comes to making their decision to move up. These may be some of the sacrifices that they may not be willing to make. But granted, some are, and they do move up knowing that these are the sacrifices that have to be made. Now, guys, we're going to have a guest today. But before I introduce my guest, I've got my two sponsors. We have American Military University. Guys, if you're looking to pursue higher education, get that degree, please check out American Military University. It's a great school. It's an online school. They're very supportive of what we do in corrections, supportive of what we do on Tier Talk. So please, guys, give it a shot. Check it out. Worth your time. And then we also have Guardian RFID. From inmate tracking and cell checks to cloud-based business and artificial intelligence, Guardian RFID digitally transforms jails, prisons, and juvenile detention facilities of every size. Visit guardianrfid.com for more information. And I also have my book, Inmate Manipulation, that is out. That's on Amazon. Working on my next book called It's a Daily Reader. It's going to be out probably by the end of the year, beginning of next. Really devoted to it every day. And that I'll let you know when that comes out. Again, but right now we have link to Inmate Manipulation Decoded. It's in description. And we also have the author of The Cage Was Her Cocoon. She's coming on now. Her name is Connie Alleyne. And by the way, I'm not the author. I actually messed up, but we're going to go with it. I should have put this, let's just talk about this. I should have put this out after I brought you on. See, to me, that would have made more sense. So let's do this again, but it's okay. Well, I want to introduce you twice, Connie. I want to introduce you twice. So guys, guess who I have? None other than Connie Alleyne, the author of The Cage Was Her Cocoon. Connie,
Oh my goodness.
Introduce yourself, Connie.
Hello, everybody. Connie Alleyne here. I am the founder and president of the Civilian Corrections Academy. I'm also the podcast host of The Fly Behind the Wall and the author of The Cage Was Her Cocoon. So listen, it's been a good time. I think just doing these shows, we have so much just happening in the background. And really, I'm looking forward to discussing this particular topic because a lot of times there are some assumptions that, managers have it easy, as you move up, that it gets easier. And it's really just not the case.
Yeah, you kind of just said it right there. People think it's easier and it's not. I know it's hard to see that, but trust and believe when you move up, you just see things that you can't unsee. You're responsible for things that sometimes you wish you weren't. But having said that, there's a bigger picture and you're involved in that bigger picture. So what I'll do is me and Connie thought of these things together. So what I'll do is I'll post it up first. I'll have Connie go first and I'll go second. So the first thing I thought that me and Connie agreed on, I think something that we have to choose to sacrifice is that in order to grow, we will sacrifice comfortability for growth. So again, we choose growth over comfortability. Connie, how does that, what do you think about that? I know. What do you got?
Well, that's kind of likened to what, some may call stretch assignments, except it's actually your job, right? So it kind of pulls you out of what like the back of your hand, right? So when I was a discharge planner, I knew discharge planning, right? I stepped into this managerial role and it was like, okay, you got to manage this and this and this and this. And like, you got to figure it all out. You got to figure out how to manage your time in order to manage all of the requirements of the role. And then you've got to also add into that, like managing the staff and managing all the other external influencers on your job that you got no control over. So if I'm choosing to grow and I've stepped into this role, I'm sacrificing that that comfort zone. I just can't be in it anymore because the things that I knew that didn't really require me to do much thinking no longer fall under my scope. And so now I'm pushed into learning all this stuff. Like, you know, when I first started, I wasn't like, I didn't need to know all of the security side of custody, right? It was like, that's not my job. Like, discharge planning is it. I have nothing else I need to think about but getting these guys into the programs. And then the moment I stepped into that managerial role, it's like, here are the policies, the procedures, the administrative directives. You need to understand how this is going to impact you and the staff. You need to, like, there was just so much to understand. And it is uncomfortable because you're also forced to make decisions with all of this new information that you're like, holy crap, did I do the right thing? Did I interpret it the right way? And did I reach out to the right people to get the guidance I needed in order to like lead appropriately? So there's just so much I think that comes along with that you just don't get the luxury of being comfortable in anymore.
Yeah, and I think also, if I can add, growth is intentional growth is obviously something that we should look to strive to do every day. I mean, you don't want to always stay within that comfort zone because at that point you're never learning. So there is a level of uncomfortability when it comes to I'm going to step out, I'm going to learn, I'm going to grow something new. I'm going to learn something new, I'm going to grow. And the thing here, guys, especially in corrections, when you cross into these newer positions, or especially for me, I've been to 4 different facilities. Each position I've been to has been because I've gotten promoted. So having said that, just when I get comfortable at one facility, I get promoted, move to the next facility. Well, now I got to learn everything all over again, meet new people, understand the dynamic, the culture of the facility. But again, I needed to do that because that's the next step of my professional growth. Also, as you move up, you learn more. You see things that, most people at the front line may not see. Again, that's the privilege of moving up. You're exposed to bigger pictures. You're
I
bigger
like the way
areas of.
you said that.
Huh? What
I
happened?
like that. The privilege of moving up.
Oh, should I make that into a T-shirt?
I
God,
like
we
it.
have a lot of T-shirts that you failed to commit to here. You know what I mean? This,
I like it.
I
I
should
like
make
it a
that one. We'll
lot.
get through the moment now, and I'll tell you later how we're not going to do it. You know, no, because we have a lot of great T-shirts that we come up with in the moment, and I have yet to see my wife wearing one. So obviously Mia would. I'm going to tell Mia because Mia's been looking for shirts. And I'm
Oh
going
my
to tell her
goodness.
Connie's failed. She has not made the effort to make any. Uh, no, I thought, you know what? That came off the top of the head. If anybody's interested in making shirts, let me know. Email me. Probably not, but hey, why not? I could, making shirts. I use a couple of bucks. But anyway, so as you grow, as you move into the new positions, obviously there's more to learn. The picture is bigger, so it is uncomfortable. It is. But having said that, I promise you, going through that makes it worthwhile. And then just when you get comfortable again, you go out for another promotion, then you move to your next
Yeah.
facility. I mean, I'm again generalizing stuff, but you guys get the picture. I mean, for me, it was every time I moved up, I went to another facility. I had to start new again. And, but mind you, though, good thing about it all, though, too, for me, is when I started at that another facility, that second facility or the third or the fourth, I started with a different perspective each time. So maybe it's good to kind of go to the, different, like the different facilities if you're able to, if you work for a state agency. Like at first, when I was an officer, I moved to a sergeant, I went to another facility. Maybe it was good for me to go to another facility and embrace the sergeant's role instead of maybe being at that first facility and kind of falling back once in a while to that officer's role. And what's good about that too is when I move up, the people only know me in that role. So, that's pretty cool too. So there's really nothing in the environment that's pushing me backwards. This is more about me
Mhm.
embracing things and moving forward. But again, obviously we know personal, because this is personal and professional growth. It's not meant to be comfortable. But having said that, there is a great reward at the end because I'll tell you something. I would love to show you where this works. I would love for me now to talk to me when I was an officer because that's probably the only way you're going to realize that everything was worth it. Especially if you want to grow in this profession. If somewhere along the line your values and things are intertwined with the growth of what you're doing in this profession. I would love to sit down and see who I was, and see who I am now, and have that dialogue. And I think it would be fuck. I think. Well, I'm just that excited. I think it would be freaking. I meant to say freak. You know. Yeah. But I would love to have that dialogue and just to kind of appreciate. But guys, again, growth over comfortability. And the reason why I'm saying that, guys, and I guess to close this thought out, is if you're not willing to get uncomfortable, if you're not willing to stretch yourself to the limits, I think there's no growth. Connie, would you have any last thoughts on that part?
Yeah, I mean, I think that with growth comes that desire to be better, to be a different version of yourself, right? And so understanding that that different version is going to challenge the things that you believe in. It may challenge the things that you think, or the way you think about things. And so you've got to be able to sort of embrace that there will be some discomfort in your growth process as you're learning and as it's challenging you mentally and all the things you think you know about the job. Because when you get to that next level, it's going to broaden your perspective, and it's going to be like, oh, I didn't even know that we did that. I didn't understand how that was all connected. But perhaps at your current level, that's just not the perspective that you have, because maybe you've not been exposed. But the more you get exposed to, the more it kind of opens your eyes to like, oh, this is why they do that. He's not just an asshole, right? Like, because sometimes that's what you think, like, oh, why is she acting like this? Right. But it's because with that broader perspective and that broader understanding, that there's going to be a lot more that you've got to take in.
Yeah, and guys, I want to tell you something too before we go on to the next one, is that sometimes we could also get comfortable on the shift we're on, or comfortable in the position that we work daily. And maybe that also becomes our greatest enemy too, because that could later become our excuse for not moving up. It's like, well, I got weekends off now, and or I don't want to
Mhm.
switch shifts. But all that is part of the growth process. It's like,
Mhm.
hey, I know I get it, but again, it doesn't mean you can't get those shifts again. Doesn't mean you're not gonna be able to get those days again, but you're gonna have to go through a bit of adjustment. So sometimes when we find ourselves stuck in the position and too comfortable, maybe we should start doing things differently, just so if we want to grow. Because the last thing you want to do is, I know some people that will be like, they'll have the aspiration, they come in and they want to go all the way to the top, but then all of a sudden they get a very comfortable bid with maybe minimal work, whatever it is, and they're like, you know what, I could do this till I retire. And it's like,
Or
wow,
what
you
what
just came in.
the point you made about the shift, I think, is really important, because I've had people who worked on third shift, no, who worked on first shift, and said they'll never work on third
Right.
shift, not because of the timing, but because there weren't managers on third shift and they were forced to make decisions. Right. So, like, depending on what's happening on the shift, there are some people who may never move. And I get what you're saying, that from shift to shift, there's different levels of comfort for different reasons, right? It may not just oh, it's easy. No, it could just be like, okay, there's less accountability, there's more accountability.
Right.
I had another person who wanted to work on third shift because they were like, there's no inmate movement, right? And I'm like, oh, okay, well, but I think that's the thing, right? Whatever works for you. But if you want to grow, you just know that there's going to be times where you're uncomfortable.
Yeah, and as I said, I think that if you come in knowing that this is a career, maybe it is good that you move around a little bit and don't keep yourself in one spot, because at any moment, you're right. You could get. I want to be, as I said, I want to be a manager. I want to be a supervisor, whatever it is, and you wind up at the very beginning getting a cake job, and now it's like, well, I'm used to getting weekends off. I'm used to coming 8 to 4. I'm used to doing the work that's here, and then all of a sudden, your aspirations to move up is gone because now you have an easier road. But I will tell you another thing though. There are some people that are go-getters that
Mhm.
kind of chase the opportunities to grow, and they're the kind of people that don't want to stay too long in one position because they realize, well, at this point I'm not growing. I'm doing the same thing every day, so therefore I'm getting bored. I'm getting bored. That's a good word when you have someone that's a go-getter, because sometimes they'll say, and I'm not saying bored makes you complacent. I'm not saying that the person's still on their toes doing what they got to do. I know my audience. But what I'm saying is that you'll have some people that they look to learn, and all of a sudden they may work a job with a lot of energy right at the beginning, but all of a sudden they start to look and they're maybe in their mind, and I kind of got the nuts and bolts of this, and I know there's other things out here that I can learn, and all of a sudden they start becoming antsy, because they know there's more out there. And I think that is key. When someone starts getting bored, they may start looking and say, well, that may be a sign of a go-getter. That may be someone that has aspirations. I know a lot of people that switch from bid to bid to bid, and it's like, man, are you chasing the days? And some of them could be, but for the most part, someone's like, no, it's just there's nothing left in this position to offer, so I'm going to try this position. I'm going to try that position. And those are usually the ones that a couple years later, sergeant. A couple years
They
later,
want to be
lieutenant.
challenged.
They embrace the challenge. For them, it's an opportunity.
Yeah.
So again, guys, be careful if you want to come in and grow. Be careful of the positions that you put yourself in that could make you comfortable. And if you feel that you're getting too comfortable to the point where you're not willing to make that sacrifice to move up, like if you find yourself saying, well, I could move up, but right now I really like this bid, maybe you should bid out. I know it sounds crazy, guys, but these could be choices that we may regret later on. And when people say family and time with the family, let me tell you something, guys, real quick. I find that in my position now, yes, and we'll get to freedom and responsibility though, I am home. I'm not going to say I'm not. So there is a benefit of making all the sacrifices and making all those choices and later on securing that higher position. So yes, I went through it. I remember getting mandatory 3-4 times a week. I've been through it. I worked on third shift and we had to move into first shift, and there was always lesser people on third to cover first. And when people called out, you're getting hit. I've been through it all. But having said that, there could have been some sacrifices, and I get it. But also, there's also a quality of life that comes with moving up. So eventually, your presence can lessen a little bit. A lot of things that we could do pretty much through emails. In our position. Not saying I don't go on the floor. I love going on the floor. I love interacting. But again, being on scene is not as much as demanding it would be for an officer or a sergeant or someone that's on the front line. But with that said, quality of life does get better when you move up. So there are sacrifices. I get it, but in the long run, like in my position, looking backwards now, I would never change a choice that I made, because I know for a fact if I stayed in that one position as an officer, I may have been comfortable, but I wouldn't have been happy. And my family would have seen it. And my family would have been like, hey, listen, you got to do something to make yourself happy. And we're willing to support whatever that is. So if that means that you have to move up or get yourself out of this routine, because in the end, I want to do something big, I want to do something great, that's when, your family will support you. Because in the end, I want to be with my family, but I want it to be quality time as well. And I need to be happy with what I'm doing in life. And yes, work is work, home is home. I get it. But guys, we have to be at work 40 hours a week for 25 years. I don't want to be miserable for 40 hours a week for 25 years. So I am going to pursue things that make me happy in my job so I can wake up on Monday and look forward to doing it. And for me, I like to grow. I like to be uncomfortable for a bit and figure it out. So I think that's key. And I know I added a lot there. So Connie, before we move to the next one, I know you may have a couple of things to say on that. It's okay. It's my show. I have plenty of time.
Listen, I think that you're spot on when you say your quality of life does change, right? I remember first starting, and someone didn't come in, I had to stay. There was always something, right? And I think in understanding that there's always something, right? Like you're literally kind of at the mercy of the institution, right? Because that is a need. And it's not to say that those some things don't come up as you move up the ranks, because they do come up. And there may be times, but they're fewer and further between that you would have those some things that come up that kind of pull you away from your family. And granted, there's certain things that are inherent in your title. So as your role changes, or as your responsibilities increase, yes, there may be some pull on your time, but it's simply just not the same. And I think having the flexibility of, I can come in on any shift and still get my hours in as an administrator was golden for me. That means I didn't necessarily have to miss, the recital. I didn't necessarily have to miss gymnastics and all those other things, because I know that I could come in first shift, second shift, or third shift. And were there times where I was mandatory to be on a first shift because of a meeting or some sort of operational situation that I knew I needed to participate in? Absolutely. But there was still a little more flexibility. So, anyone who's a little hesitant to move up and kind of sort of making up reasons, just understand that there are pros and cons to every decision. And as you move up, even though the accountability changes and it broadens, you do get some flexibility.
Yeah, and guys, that is key. So again, if you're looking to move up, really evaluate, why you want it, of course. But having said that, those excuses that you may have, because sometimes those excuses just to soothe you, because you may not want to make the effort. So those excuses become something that you can live with later
Ooh, you
on. But I'll guarantee
stinging.
you,
That stings.
yeah, but I'm being honest, um, yeah, yeah, I don't know where the hell that came from, Connie. Thanks, but you know what? We got to speak the truth. And man, we're not going to get over this first one, but I got something else I want to add on that. It's all right. It's all right, Connie.
It's the truth though. Like, I mean, for someone to be able to admit that their excuse is just because you don't want to make the effort, like it gives you comfort to know that you didn't move up because you've sort of pacified yourself with an excuse, is just crazy.
Well,
But
Connie,
yeah.
the reason why I said that was because later on, when you go to look back, wondering if you could have done more, these are things that
Mhm.
won't have weight because deep down
Yeah.
inside, you can only lie to yourself for so long until you realize that you could have made the effort. You could have made whatever these slight sacrifices were. When you start to realize it is when other people are making the opportunity, or taking the opportunity, and then maybe 7, 8 years later, you're looking at it like, man, that could have been me
You're like,
because they
damn, I
got
could have did
weekends
that.
off on the same shift.
Yeah.
So again, it's people that are willing to take the sacrifice, but again, there's an effort there. There is an effort there, but again, the excuses that you may utilize now may not have any value later on when you're going to be overwhelmed with, man, I should have done this, I should have done this, I should have done this, and you never did because you convinced yourself of these sacrifices. That yet the funny thing is everybody else went through it and they came out okay. You know, so yeah, I think that was definitely we really went through that one.
Yeah.
So the next sacrifice. Now this is going to be fun to explore, and it's good that I don't pay Connie by the minute, hour, weekly. Me and Connie are friends. So so this one's going to be unique. I'm gonna have Connie attack it first, but I just want to mention something real quick. There's a myth that as you move up, you get more freedom. And that's not true. So for this one, you're going to choose um, it's responsibility over freedom. So that's the sacrifice there. You're sacrificing freedom for more responsibility. So, and by the way, the things we're sacrificing, uh, we're not always getting the best in return. But let's explain this. And by the way, you see that word responsibility? That word was the key word that I had to accept before I moved up into a supervisory role. Anybody that's moving up into a supervisory role, that right there is the key word that you need to evaluate before you ever move up. It's not about more pay, it's none of that. It's this. Are you willing to take on the responsibility of others? What's your thoughts on this, Connie? Responsibility over freedom.
So, I mean, this is a tough one, right? Because I think, people tend to think that as you move up, you can just delegate and you shift your responsibility to other people. And that's just simply not the case, right? Because the level of accountability grows exponentially as your responsibilities grow. And so you no longer have the freedom to be a slacker. So if I came in today and I figured, I'm not going to pull my own weight, or, I don't need to do this, I could cut this corner, I could do that, I could make life easier for myself, no one would ever know. When you move up, you just kind of lose that ability to do that. You don't get to not show up and be 110%, right? You just don't. The responsibilities and the accountability for the outcomes, I think, is so major. So like when you think about, okay, I've got X amount of things to do, I'm gonna delegate these 10 things and I'm gonna do these 10 for myself. even if I've delegated those 10 things, I'm responsible for the outcomes of those 10 things. I can't go back to my central office and say, oh, this is what they did and they messed it up. I'm responsible for those 10 plus the 10 that's on my plate and the outcome based on whatever the expectation is, right? And I think that sometimes we get a little, sort of stuck in that space of, oh, the manager don't really do nothing, or that's all they do, right? Because you only see what you see them doing in front of you and not all of the stuff that they're doing on the back end. So that's where I'm at where it comes to responsibility over freedom.
Yeah, you know what's funny, guys? When I go, okay, so I'm in management now, so I'm at a pretty high level of running the house, and I do have the title of administrator, associate. So I'm kind of like, I guess, equivalent to a deputy warden. Pretty much second person in charge of operations. And when I go through stressful situations, when I kind of question, like, why the hell did I do? Because we all have these moments. Now, don't get me wrong, we're allowed to do that. Doesn't mean I regret it. I just have to remind myself. You kind of know. So it's funny because when I do that and I kind of compare where I am now to where I was back then, I always go back to this smoke break. The last smoke break I ever did as an officer for inmates. I remember calling out the smoke break, watching the female inmates, do their little smoke. It was around 9:30. And I knew once the smoke break was done, I would turn in my radio and go home and wouldn't have to worry about the job until I came back into work the next day. My responsibility was pretty much over at that moment, unless I was getting mandated. So, with that said, um, I use responsibility over freedom because I believe when we're free, it's because we don't have responsibilities. Now, bear with me, guys. It makes sense, guys. If I feel totally free, it's because I'm able to break away from any of the chains that tend to hold me down. So, with that said, I'm not saying that the front line doesn't have levels of responsibility. They do, but after their 8 hours, it's done. Or after their 16 hours or whatever, it's done. Whereas you start to move up, it starts to increase because your responsibilities are not just for yourself. You're not just in charge of yourself, but you're also in charge of areas of control that have people that you're now in charge of. And when you're at this high level and you're running a prison, well, you're constantly checking your emails because I may not be present, let's say, on most of second shift and most of third, but I'm still responsible for their actions. I still have to read about it the next day, or I may be checking the emails to see what's going on in the moment. So, having said that, the responsibilities increase because you're still responsible for things even when you're not present, at that level. So, for me, the constant checking of the emails, because I find myself always doing that because I don't want to fall behind. I do want to know what's happening within the facility I work at. That is a heightened level of responsibility. And to be honest with you guys, there's really no lighter side to this, as we did with the comfortable versus the growth, because growth, everybody wants to grow. I want to learn. So there is a positive side to that. But when it comes to responsibility, the reason why we put that in there is not because, it's something that you're easily going to welcome, but it's something that you must be willing to take accountability for, because that's the main reason why you should be taking a position. If you're going to move up, you have to ask yourself one question. Are you willing to take the responsibilities of the people that you're now going to supervise? So the reason why I wanted to put that in there, I think Connie would agree, is that you're not just governing yourself anymore. You're in charge of the actions of many individuals, and even many individuals when you're not even on site. Depending on how high up you go, the areas of responsibility do increase each level you go up. So with that said, you have to embrace that. You have to embrace that and know that if I'm going to take a position, if I'm going to move up, am I willing to take responsibility of other people and give up that level of freedom in regards to, well, when I'm an officer, maybe I only have to care about me at that moment, but now I'm moving up and now I have a greater level of control, which includes people that are under my direct supervision. But Connie, anything with that? Anything else you want to add?
Um, I don't think so. I mean, I think that point is well
Okay,
made.
since you didn't think so, we'll move on to the next topic. No, I'm kidding. I never, guys. I just wanted to do that because I know she has something valuable to say. So she meant to say, "I do think so." This is what I'd like to add. Go ahead, Connie. No, because I know you got something. Because I'm waiting for it. Because you were nodding.
Yeah, I was nodding because I agreed. I honestly
Yeah,
feel
but it was a
like
slow nod, and then it went to a fast nod, which means you wanted to say something. Like this is the guys. So this is Connie. So when she agrees with the thought, it's a slow nod. I agree. But when she wants to add, it goes, and then you see it. And I saw that briefly. So I know you want to add something. Come on, Connie.
no, I don't want to add nothing else yet. Oh my god.
I'm depressed. All right, so that closes off responsibility over freedom. All right, so this to me, um, this is something that is tough because this is really. All right, let me say something. So we have sacrificing your opinions over values. So basically, choosing values over opinion. What does that mean? I'm not saying to sell yourself, like sell yourself out. I'm not saying that. So basically, guys, let me tell you something. As you start to move up, good supervisors align with the values of the agency and what it is that they expect. That doesn't mean that you sell your people short. You could still be a voice for their concerns, but at one point, you are representing the house. You're representing what they need, and that's part of the responsibility. That you're responsible to the bigger picture. You're responsible ultimately to the house. You have to share in their values, and I know sometimes that could be tough because you may have these opinions that are against that, and people will come up to you if they don't agree with something and expect you to agree with them, and it's like, yeah, even if I do, I have to express the values of the house, especially if it's at a point where there's no maneuvering. This is what has to happen, and guys, it's my job to motivate you to comply. It's not my job to be miserable and expect you to comply. It's my job to adopt what the values are and then do what I can to keep you motivated and to going into a direction that you may not agree with. Because it happens, guys. We're never going to get things 100% our way. So with that said, when it comes to opinions over values, it's not about forgetting who you are, but it is about more of, I get my feelings about a certain topic, but as I move up, I'm in a trusted position to kind of remove my feelings and then express what is lined up with the values of the agency and really truly do your best to sell that to your people and not do something like, yeah, well, that's what they want. No, you have to buy into it. You have to buy into it, because if that's the case, I'm going to say one thing, guys, because that is part of the responsibility. If make all effort, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying not to make effort, but if there's a chance where there's nothing that you can do about it, this is going to happen. It's coming down the pike. Your job now is to make sure that frontline understands why it has to be implemented. To build that bridge between the front line, who's going to have to deal with it, but also management, who has to strategically come up with something that has to be implemented because their hands are tied. They have no choice. And what you want to do is, your job in the middle is to kind of translate that and make sure that you kind of get them to go along with it. And again, that's where your opinion of something negative is not going to work. It's going to build animosity. It's going to divide. You have to literally find value and then go ahead and translate that value to the people. So when there's a change, your job is to convince them to want to make that change, because again, it's in alignment with the values of what the agency wants. And when your opinion is not in alignment with the values, and there's really nothing you can do, the point is this has to happen, then you have to adjust. And if you can't adjust and translate that message right, you may be in the wrong position. Is that harsh to say? Yes, but is that reality? Guys, I don't want a bunch of disgruntled individuals on the bottom. I want someone that's able to translate the stuff we have to do into something meaningful that can tell the front line what you're doing has importance because it's in line with the values. It's task significant. But Connie, what's your thoughts on values over opinion? I mean, this is a tough one because a lot of people will think this, Connie. Maybe I can kind of give you a little bit of something to edge in so you don't forget, because I would love to hear your thoughts on this specifically. A lot of people will think that when you choose the values of the agency over, let's say, your opinions, that you're selling out.
So I think it's just the opposite, right? Like I feel like as you step into these leadership roles, and you may have strong opinions, right? I could think of a number of things I had strong opinions about. Like, I mean, just think about how much controversy there's been over MAT, right? Methadone maintenance or Suboxone, right? How many strong opinions there's been on transgender management. I mean, there are very strong opinions, right? But I think as a leader, as a manager, there is a time and a place and an appropriate space for you to express your opinions. And then there's a time that you put that aside and you understand what the mission is and the why. And so you are now shifting gears into that space where, like you made a statement about, there's a point where you're representing the agency, but the reality is that we're always all representing the agency, right? If this is the mission of the agency, we don't got to walk around carrying the signs, right? Like we've not all drank the blue juice, right? But if this is what we're trying to accomplish, if I'm walking around sort of spewing my opinion that isn't necessarily based in fact, I am moving contrary to the agency's mission, right? So it's not about, what I personally feel. It is understanding the mission and why we're going in this direction. And then it is my responsibility to make sure that those who I work with understand the mission and the direction that we're going in. And I've never told anyone their opinion doesn't matter. Your opinion matters. However, this is the direction we're going in, and here's the expectations of you as we move in that direction. And I think we just got to be very clear. No one's saying you can't have an opinion. And just because you are complying with a directive doesn't mean that you're selling out. This is the expectation of you in this role to comply, to help us achieve the mission, and then you can express that, right? Like we would always have meetings, debriefings, and all that stuff. How do you feel about it? What was good? What didn't work? Like all of those things. And it's okay to express, because I mean, in the space of leadership, we've made many sort of healthcare decisions, right? Like this is how we're going to prioritize things. This is what we're going to do, whatever. But when I'm at central office in the meeting and we're making the decisions, like that's when it's appropriate for me to express my opinion. When I'm now going back with sort of the marching orders, right? This is what we need to see happen in the facility, Connie. My opinion has to stay in the back, right? Perhaps maybe if there's someone who like maybe the other managers, right? I might say, oh, I think this is so stupid. I don't know why we're doing this, but this is what we got to do. We're going to go make it happen. Because that's really what we're looking for. This is not saying all of a sudden that you no longer have a mind of your own and you can't think independently. That's not the case. The case is, here's the mission. This is what we expect to see you make happen in the facility. And so it kind of puts you in that space where your opinion kind of goes into the background until you can get your people motivated in the right direction.
Yeah, that's one of my weaknesses too, because when I don't agree with something, I find it is. I find myself, you know, I don't translate it well, and I have to make that better. Because also, to be honest with you, if you keep on being that person on the outcast, sometimes maybe it is you. Because you got to realize something too. So as we evolve, you figure the changes that we're facing right now, right, are due because maybe there's a problem that we want to solve, a perspective, whatever it is. And right now, the people that are looking at the problems are it's diverse. I mean, you got
Mhm.
people from the outside, people from the inside. I mean, it's not even about one solution. It's about so many people looking at the problem in so many different ways that the solution itself may be not something that we're used to, but something that makes sense, and we have to allow ourselves to kind of see that. Most of the time when we go back and we have a problem with something, it's because we have a very myopic view of what it is and what we expect. But then when someone explains it to you at the higher level, then you could find out, well, you know what? I didn't think of that. I didn't think of how what I wanted could affect others.
Yeah.
So technically, you have to be able to understand what's coming your way. And if you have questions, ask questions. But the person that's in charge of translating that message, you have to be able to understand and make sure that that translation comes out correct to the people that have to implement it, that they know that if they have questions, you have to be able to answer it in a manner that motivates them, not a manner that gives them another reason to complain or demotivates them. I mean, the last thing you want to do is be the obstacle. At this point here, you're not the obstacle. You're at the table. We all get to, say our peace of mind. But I love what Connie said. Once it's done, it's done. Now you become a resource for me. So at first, let's do this. At first, we all have our discussions, right? I just thought of this just now. At first, we all have our discussions. We look at a problem 20 million different ways to come out with a solution that's diverse and acceptable, that kind of hits all areas that need to be addressed. Now, when you as a manager, as a leader, go down, if you express your opinion, you become an obstacle. If you express your value, the value of the agency, what you're aligned with, what you have to translate, you become a resource. So you have to ask yourself, when you're going from that meeting to translate what needs to be out to the front line, are you going as something that could be an obstacle? Something that stops what needs to be done? Or are you going as a resource, something that's going to facilitate that, motivate that, give that the momentum it needs so you can let that go and move on to the next thing? So does that make sense, Connie, leaving that meeting either being an obstacle or being a resource?
Absolutely. And I think that also just goes back
Possible
to time.
t-shirt or no? Going
I
too
don't know
far with
about
that
that
one?
one. That one is not as powerful.
Tried, guys. I tried. Making all these efforts
Oh
to
my God.
make a business here, but obviously that I thought don't be an obstacle, be a resource. Oh, on the front, don't be an obstacle. On the back, be a resource. $100 a shirt. You pay 50 for the front, 50 for the back. You know,
Oh
Connie,
man.
right now you're an obstacle to me. Be a resource. Make the
See,
shirts.
listen, I think that in being a resource, right, like that also is just goes back to the time and place. There is a time and place to express your opposition to something. And I don't think when you're in front of staff trying to get staff to um, buy in to the path forward, I don't think that's the time for us to sort of express our opposing opinions. I think you open the door, yes, for the staff to express how they feel because you want to be able to be a resource in that moment. Oh, I get what you're saying. Here's why we're doing this, right? It's not shutting them down that they can't have an opinion. You can have an opinion. Perhaps in the midst of this discussion, this is the appropriate time and place for them to express their opinions. But if the goal is to gain that buy-in so that we can move forward with the mission, then I think that's our reality, that allow them to express what they're feeling. And then in that moment, you, who's the manager, has to be able to serve as the resource to help answer those concerns, to address those concerns that they're bringing forward. And if it's things that you can address, you could say, you know what, that's a good point. Let's do this moving forward and let me get back to that. Right. Like, so that I think there's ways to handle it so that, even in having an open forum, allowing people to express how they feel, letting them know that their voice matters. Like, I think that matters. But there's also that time and place where you can take that concern that's been raised that you might not have been able to address in the moment, which is okay, and then go back to that person and say, hey, I went to check on this thing, whatever that thing is that you couldn't address in the moment. Here's how this addresses that issue. And I think that's the way we have to sort of serve as a resource, even in times where we may have an opposing opinion to something.
Right. And guys, I want to mention something real quick. So I know a lot of people may come into this profession, corrections, and think that they're going to come in and create this big change in how things are done. And to be honest with you, I've been in this business long enough to know that that's very hard to do. I'm not saying it can't be done because I don't want to, um, you know, I don't want people not to be motivated. If that's what they feel, then by all means try. But it's very hard to do. Very hard to do. So what you tend to do as management is you try to help with morale by being that good translator, that keeps people motivated when they don't like what's happening. I mean, I think that's why it's good. The supervisors that are coming in now, it's tough times, but we need good supervisors to keep people motivated because there is a lot of negativity in this profession. There is, but there's also a glimmer of hope. There's something there on the horizon. And with that said, you need people there that can show people that. And being a supervisor now and keeping people motivated is extremely hard, but it's what we have to do. That's our job as supervisors. Pretty much that's what it is that we wind up having the impact on is during these roughest times. You remember for what? For being that team leader who, valued the work that was being done, who showed appreciation, who showed recognition during these toughest times. People remember you because you motivated them during these toughest times to work, to carry out the mission. So with that said, for the people that want to become supervisors, want to move up, I assume you're moving up because you're aligned with the values that are already in place. That you're not moving up to totally 180 everything. I mean, that's ridiculous. You're moving up because that, let's say, what, they need a leader right now to remind them of their importance, to motivate them, to get them involved in the change, to build a bridge. But one thing you're not moving up for is to be an obstacle. So having said that, I think your job is to really get people to embrace the change. So once they embrace it, they could be a part of it, as opposed to that recreational complaining and just being part of that, where at the end of the day, what's hard? There's nothing hard about that. You can join in on the bullshit dialogue that goes nowhere in the end, or you can try to convince people to stay motivated, try to find value in the work that's happening now, and even if connect that person's job to something of greater importance that's being done for the agency. But the key here, guys, is that again, you got to, if you're moving up, you have to. If you don't believe in the work that you do, my problem is that if you move up, you become a reflection of that negative belief, but now you're in a higher position to kind of influence people, more people, in a negative way. I figure if you're going to move up, maybe there's two things. You're willing to take responsibility, 100%. And then the secondary question could be, do you believe in the work that's being done? And can you be a positive message for the work that has to be done? I think to me that matters. That's why I look for. Like, listen, I'll tell you something. If I have to go through changes, I get it. I get it. But I'll love to work with a leader that can motivate me during these tough times because, again, I'm going to have to do it. It's coming down the pike. So maybe it'd be good to have someone in those positions that can motivate us to do the work that we may not want to do. But that doesn't mean that person, that there's no value behind the work. That person can teach us the value behind the work that we don't want to do. And then
Mhm.
eventually we may come around and appreciate the work we're doing because we find value in ourselves doing it. Connie, I saw the last three nods were quick.
Yeah, I
Could
think
I safely
it
assume?
all boils down to knowing why you're there, right? There's got to be like, because it's almost like, why take a position if you don't align with the values, right? If you don't believe in the organization, you don't believe in the mission, you don't believe in the values, and you can't find yourself in alignment nowhere, like it's almost like, well, why take on the role, right? Like, and I think the question you asked early on, is this for you, right? Like it's almost like, make sure you examine yourself before you even seek to move up into one of these spaces, especially if you have very strong feelings against all of the things that the organization represents.
Yeah, and Connie, I did a video right before. It's actually doing pretty well. It's about know who you are when you're coming into this profession. Knowing
Mm-hmm.
who you are also aligns you with values and purpose. So again, you're coming into the profession knowing that the profession has something to offer you. And I said in that video, knowing who you are definitely gives you a steady foundation. So you can, if you see any shifts from the pressures of the job mentally, you're able to deal with it. But there's another thing about it. Knowing who you want to become matters too, because this profession could affect us, yes. But knowing who you want to become can help you make positive intentional growth, which means that you know what areas you want to seek out and what areas may not be as valuable. But again, you have to know who you are coming in, and you also have to know who you want to become. And for the people that get lost in this profession, most likely it's one of those two things. It's because they didn't really know who they were coming in. So therefore they've shifted so much without no destination where to go back to, or they haven't really decided what they want to become. So therefore, they have no focus. They're just kind of stuck. And again, that's going to affect everybody. So I would say literally those two things do matter, and that will play out, especially when it comes to know who you want to become. That's going to play out when you choose a supervisory role. Because when
That's
you choose a
actually,
supervisory role,
as I'm thinking about that, I'm like, when I created the Civilian Corrections Academy, that's actually the second module of the academy. It's all about who are you and knowing who you are. And I mean, I feel like, sometimes when we start talking about like having these discussions, it kind of brings things full circle, right? Like, because when you don't know who you are, the environment has the ability to mold you in a way. And I think if when you walk in and you're unclear about what direction you want to head in, then you can't check yourself when you're drifting along the wrong way, right? And I think that's something just really powerful for us to, I mean, maybe we could do another show about it, but I think that's a very strong point, that when you don't know who you are, it's very difficult for you to be on a path where you're intentionally developing areas that, there are opportunities for growth. And I think, in some instances, some people may simply be in denial that they may not be so strong in a particular area as they think they are, right? They may not be as knowledgeable as they think they are. So like, I mean, I think as we're going through this process of just discussing this, like, I'm like, this is just, it's a lot, I think, for us to be able to reflect and be able to say, like, am I in the right place? Am I doing the right things? Am I doing them for the right reasons? And even if they're unclear, I'm clear enough about myself that I can go to someone and ask for some guidance.
yeah, I mean, one of the things before we come to a close that uh, obviously opinions can be different than values, but sometimes your opinions are aligned with those values.
Yeah.
Which should definitely be a big motivator if you're looking to move up. Again, I mean, that would be great. I mean, that's someone you definitely want to move up. That's why I think even when you go on the interviews to move up, whatever it is, guys, as you start moving up in the higher positions where there's more of a trust factor, and it's not about you just carrying it out, but do you believe in what you're carrying out? You'll realize that when they interview and they ask you questions, they don't just ask you about changes and policies and procedures. They want to know, do you believe in it? Because
Mm-hmm.
if you believe in it, believe it or not, when a lot of decisions you make as you move up, especially in the admin, we're not always governed by policy because there aren't policies written for everything. So they want to know the foundation for the choices that you're making.
And why?
What yeah, like basically if I know that you have a good sense of where we're going, then I could trust you to make choices that have pioneer choices that have yet to
Mm-hmm.
occur. And now you're put in a situation where your values are in line with the agency. Now that's another thing, guys. As you start to move up, just this is why we have this dialogue. And I think Connie's going to want to comment on this. So, and this could be another topic in itself. As you move up, it may be very important, especially when you come into my position where you're making a lot of decisions on the fly, not really always governed by policy, because again, there's so many things that can happen that policy can't be written for everything. So as you start to move up, it's really, you really must find a way to get those opinions connected to the values, because you're going to make decisions and you want to make sure that the foundations of those decisions are aligned with the values of the agency and not your personal opinion. Connie, that's a sweatshirt, right? Or
That
hoodie
could be a
maybe.
sweatshirt.
So what's your thoughts on that before we come to a close? I mean, I just thought of that as we were discussing it.
I mean, I think that's when we step into this space, like, we've got to be able to minimize ourselves. And I think that's just a reality. Unless you own the business, your opinion isn't the most important thing that matters. And I think we've got to be able to come to terms with that, right? Whatever our values, our belief systems are. And quite frankly, if it is too far off from what we believe, then we shouldn't be here, right? But when we are in that space where we're looking at sort of what the values are and we're trying to align and we're moving forward, like, we have got to be very firm in that there is some alignment in my own personal values. And even if they're not, my personal opinions don't take front stage. Like, it don't take center stage. I think that's just a reality that we've got to like kind of work through. And hopefully we are insightful enough to be able to do that, to be able to say, I really am not, this rubbed me the wrong way. I don't like it, but like, all right, this is what we got to do. Let's get it done.
And guys, to be honest with you guys, that really is key, guys. I mean, at the end of the day, we're hired to, or we move up to be a representative of what the agency wants. And you have to embrace that as you start to get higher and higher up. Hey, author of Cage Was Her Cocoon, podcasts, Fly Behind the Wall. Anything you'd like to say in closing, ma'am?
I would just like to say, listen, we have a responsibility, right? We got jobs to do in all of our respective roles, titles, you name it. And I think we have to be mindful that we're always representing the agency, no matter what you think, we should or shouldn't be doing. Like, we are representatives of the agency, and there will always be a time and place for you to express your opinions. But when you are tasked with, doing your part in order for us to achieve the mission, you have got to be able to put your personal opinions aside and do what you know is right for the house and not what's just right for you.
And that is a jacket. That's a jacket. That's a jacket. Wow. But hey, guys, I want you to know, for my daily reader, the quote I'm going to work on tomorrow, as I really fell in love with, to choose growth over being comfortable. I think that's something I would like to put out there. But guys, I thought this was a great topic. I mean, it's just to kind of let people know that leaders make sacrifices too. Obviously, this is not to minimize sacrifices being made by the front line, but just to say that everybody's making sacrifices together. That in the end, I just wish that we could just kind of work together and understand the sacrifices that each party's making, and try to shift from a me to a we, or me to an us culture. Where we tend to all get along, and eventually, But I thought this was a good way to vent from our side. Let people know that we're human too, and sometimes we wish we can go back to being the front line sometimes, but that doesn't mean we regret the choice. But there are certain things you miss that you may not realize you miss until you miss it. What's one thing before I go? I forget. I want to say this is from The Office, the show The Office, and I'm pretty sure that's what it's from. I'm going to paraphrase this like you wouldn't believe, but Office also a great show, obviously, but there were moments that there were lessons in each one, and there was I think it's The Office, and confirm if it is, but I think there's a moment where he talks about, I wish that we could understand the power of a moment while we're going through it. Like, we may not realize it, until we're way past it, and we look back and say, man, that's kind of what happens when you start to move up. You tend to miss certain things. But having said that, the sacrifices, in the end, if someone was to ask me, was the sacrifices all worth it? Yes. Just by growth alone. So, and Connie, if I may ask you, the sacrifices that you made, was it worth it?
Absolutely. I wouldn't change anything at all. Because all of those things have led me to this very point now, which I'm super proud of.
Yeah, and guys, it's a gift that she continues to give to the profession, but it started when she made her first sacrifice, which was probably literally moving out of your comfort zone.
Oh, yeah.
So that's right, guys. Stage one, move out of your comfort zone. As always, guys, the show is Tier Talk. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. Stay safe.